Welcome back everyone, this is Mindy Eggen, and in today's video we are going to be talking about complementary colors, specifically ink blending with them, which can be tricky because they don't really blend together well, but I'm going to show you a trick for that. So first let's create our background. I'm going to be using the stamp set So Many Presents, which is a red rubber stamp from Simon Says Stamp, and this is a peel apart, so this middle piece actually peels out. You can stamp it with it in or with it out, and you can also use that separately on maybe a small gift tag. I'm going to be leaving it in to create a whole background. So I have a piece of 80-pound white cardstock cut to 6 by 6, and I'm prepping that with an anti-static powder tool. Now, because this is a red rubber stamp, it already is foam mounted. I did take the foam insert out of my Misti. So I inked that up really well with Versamark ink, which is a clear, sticky ink, and I stamped that down onto the cardstock. Now, whether in person or on camera, it can be hard to see the ink, so just to be sure I covered it, I did stamp that again. Then over a scratch piece of cardstock, I'm going to sprinkle on the sterling embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, kind of give it a little tap to make sure it settles into that sticky ink, and then sprinkle off the excess. After my heat tool is nice and warmed up, I'm going to melt that embossing powder, and the Brutus Monroe Sterling really has a nice sheen to it, very different from other silver embossing powders that I've used. Now the colors I'm using is Cherry and Fairway from Simon Says Stamp. These are complementary colors, red and green, but a lot of times if you try to blend one into the other, it doesn't always mix well. So what I'm going to do is start on one end of the cardstock blending that cherry ink. I started on the end or at the top, and as my ink is kind of wearing off the brush, it's going to fade off, and I'm going to fade it into the white of the cardstock. I'm going to apply a little bit heavier amount back at the top, but I want that kind of middle piece to fade off into white. Now I cleaned my work surface so I don't have any red there, and I'm coming in on the other end with that Fairway ink. Now, once again, as I'm blending and that ink is wearing off, it's going to kind of fade. And now I'm not really touching the red. I'm going to have that fade go right into each other. And that's really the biggest trick when trying to blend complementary colors. You want them just barely touching each other, or maybe not even, just kind of having that soft fade. Now, because my embossing resisted the ink, I wiped off that excess ink, and I'm going to trim this panel down using the Nested Rectangles die from Hero Arts. Whenever I run a rectangle through my die cut machine, I like to tilt it. So I'm just trimming off any of this excess so it's easier to tilt it and not get in the way of the edges of my die cutting machine. The focal point of my card is going to be the Amelia Snowflake die, and I'm going to die cut it from this Luxe glitter cardstock. And holy cow, get your sunglasses out. This stuff is seriously shimmery. So we have some black and we have like this iridescent silver. Of course, I'm going with the most sparkle. So I trimmed a piece off that fit my die. And then using the technique that I showed in a previous video, I'm going to die cut this out and then poke out any of those pieces that are remaining. So I have this beautiful delicate snowflake, but I'm going to back it with another piece that I die cut from 80-pound white cardstock. That's just going to give it a little bit more support. I used my Gina K Designs Connect glue in a fine tip bottle, and then I just used my fingers to kind of move that a little bit so everything lines up perfectly. I also went ahead and trimmed a piece of cardstock down to the same size as my front panel, and I added that with a tape runner behind my blended panel to give that a little bit more support as well. Now to add just a little bit more interest to my background, I'm taking this Copic white ink, added a drop of water, and adding flicks to the background. You could also use maybe a sparkly or shimmery type of ink too, would look really great on this. Then I'm just using my heat tool to kind of dry those flicks because when I flip this over to add my foam tape, I didn't want to smear my ink. I'm just going to add a few strips of that 3M foam tape behind my panel to pop it up on an A2 size card front created from 110-pound white cardstock. I'm just going to make sure that when I place that down, my margins are even on each side. And then I added liquid glue behind my snowflake, and I'm going to place that in the center of the card and then just place something heavy on top to make sure it secures down really well. My sentiment is going to be coming off of the Reverse Missing You at the Holidays set. I love these strips. Now, if you have a sentiment strip die, I do highly recommend using them. I was using my mini paper trimmer because I was being lazy, and I did cut off a little bit of the G on Hugs. I'm still going with it. I'm not going to waste this. I layered behind it pieces of cardstock to give it dimension, and I'm going around the edges with a black Copic marker for a more finished look. Now this was just actually a little bit too big for my card front. It took up too much of the snowflake because I wanted to add it in the center. So I just trimmed it apart so that way I just have holiday hugs. I added that black Copic marker to the side again just to make sure everything is finished. Put some liquid glue behind it, added it to the center of my snowflake, and placed something heavy on it. I finished it off with a few iridescent clear drops around my snowflake, and there we have it, a completed card. So complementary colors are very eye-appealing on a card front, and I hope this video and this little tip has helped you when it comes to ink blending with them because they do make a great background. I will have all of my supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again real soon. Here are a few other videos I think you might enjoy.